All right, so after work today, I came over to my buddy George's shop, and George picked up this 4-door base model Bronco for his wife Tiff to drive, and it's as bare bones as they come. It had no check marks on the option list whatsoever, except for automatic trans. So 4-cylinder, 10-speed automatic, 4-wheel drive, base model. And today we're gonna do a little lift on it, put some bigger, meatier tires and wheels on it, toughen it up for her. So he got himself some takeoff shocks from one of the Sasquatch packages, a brand new set of Methods, some 35-inch Maxxis Razor ATs, and we're gonna put this stuff on there and hopefully give it a little tougher look. Should still look nice and clean, dark wheel on the dark truck. Can't wait, let's get started. So when you get on the suspension of these things, it kind of is reminiscent of every other independent suspension vehicle you ever looked at. So the bottom of the strut bolts through the lower arm like a Chevy with the T-bar, and then bolts sticking through the lower control arm. It's got an upper control arm with one super long bolt going all the way through, much like your Toyota stuff does. And just a strut and a spindle and everything else. It's very similar to every other independent suspension that I've worked on with this type of setup. So we're gonna get in here and start tearing things apart. He has a 1-inch spacer from Rock Krawler suspensions, which is gonna go like the Chevy below the T-bar. So between that T-bar and the lower control arm, as we're bolting that into place, we're gonna get this extra spacer block in there that'll help level the truck out. So that plus the Sasquatch package struts, this thing should sit pretty cool. All right, so we marked the lower camber caster adjustment bolts on all 4 locations. And from the reading and research George has done, it sounds like best course of action so we don't overextend the CV axle is to actually unbolt the lower control arm bolts and drop the arm down on the inside. That gives you adequate space to get this stuff out of the way. So we're gonna go about it that way and see how it goes. Okay, so in tearing this apart, the nuts on your adjustment arms are 24 millimeter nut and 21 millimeter on the bolt head side. So you got to take all those loose. The sway bar mounting bolts to the frame are 18 millimeter bolt and 18 millimeter nut there. And then on the bottom of the sway bar link mounting to the control arm, you've got a Allen head inside and a 21 millimeter nut on the outside. You gotta hold that, spin that apart. So we'll get those all done and then move on. Okay, so after we undid the 3 15 millimeter nuts on the top here and the 2 18 millimeter nuts on the bottom of the strut itself, everything else, the bolts are out of those lower control arms. We got a jack supporting the lower arm so that stuff isn't gonna get too far out of place. But we're gonna slowly lower the jack, let that arm down, get the strut out of here, and we're kind of getting the new one in place. All right, so we are in the midst of getting the new one in there. So we did have to knock the studs out of the Sasquatch lower strut to install this Rock Krawler suspension spacer. So those studs were much like the ones in the factory strut. So we were able to hold it upside down, put the lip of it on a vise, and George swung at the stud while I was holding the strut. Unfortunately, the head of that is so big that you can't just clamp it in your vise and hit it because you're clamping on the stud at the same time. So 2-man process worked really well for us there. Yeah, so put the lower control arms back, bolts back in to the paint markings that we had made. And now I'm just tightening the upper strut nuts up, leaving the sway bar down so we can do the other side. And then we're gonna come around. We were doing some reading on, it appears that the Sasquatch packages come, they don't even put this little crash bar protector piece in them for tire clearance. And because we're going to a 35, we're gonna go ahead and unbolt these and get rid of them.
Sasquatch Wild Tracks, maybe.
Yeah, one of the other upgraded packages doesn't even have these. So there are some companies, I guess, that are making some modified versions or whatever. But I guess if Ford thinks that they can do it without them, then we can too. All right, so we removed the back brace, and you're able to just pull that straight out of the way. However, the front brace is kind of stuck behind the corner of the plastic bumper cap here. So we're gonna try and flex the plastic bumper cap enough to draw that part out of there. All right, so on the back here, there was two 15mm headed bolts that are holding the plastic bumper cover to this bracket where the fog light would be if it was optioned with those. So by taking those two out, we were able to flex that bumper corner way out of the way and draw that brace support out of there. So no big deal. Put these two bolts back, good to go. So we kind of got that Carolina squat theme going. Looks a little funny. So that is the Sasquatch package strut in the front with the additional 1-inch leveling spacer and bone stock base model rear suspension. That looks funny. All right, so with the front all lifted and done-ish, we still got to tighten all the upper and lower control arms like we usually do. Left all those loose so that the bushings will be centered when we tighten them up. So once we have the whole vehicle on its weight, we'll do the final torque on those. We got the back end up on jack stands, got the wheels off, took the spare off too because George is the right kind of guy and he buys a matching spare. So we're gonna get this back end done. Yeah, so you can see the side by side, the rear strut is a tiny bit different, maybe an inch, but comes out pretty much the same. There's a 15mm nuts on the top here. The bolt in the bottom is a gigantic bolt. It's got a 27mm head on it. The nut plate captures against a little bracket here on the axle housing, so you don't have to hold both sides. Not a big deal. And then we were able to remove two of the little double push pin fasteners here, and George just kind of held out on the plastic liner while I undid the bolts. It's pretty thin plastic. It's going to go right back into shape as soon as it spends 2 seconds outside in the ridiculous heat we're having here. So I'm not too worried about that. We'll get this new one bolted into place. See how it goes. All right, just like that. Not a big deal. On the back, it's just nuts and bolts. 3 nuts up top, a bolt and a nut on the bottom. Got both sides done. Pretty painless. Like I said, we're going to get these wheels bolted on and then reset all the bushings, get everything tightened up, torque the wheels. I think we're going to be good to go here shortly. All right, so there we are. So I don't know if things need to settle a little bit or if the 1-inch spacer in the front maybe wasn't necessary. Maybe the extra weight of having a full-size spare on the back. But it looks like we're a little nose high. So they're going to drive it for a few days, see if it settles down. And if it doesn't settle down, then I guess we're probably going to have to do something to level it out. And we can't go back down, so we only can go up. So we put a level dial indicator type reader on here, and it actually, the truck is level. I think it's the front wheel wells are cut higher than the rear wheel wells, giving it the illusion that the truck is sitting nose high. But according to the body line, measuring from the ground to the upper body line molding, front and rear, the truck is level to the ground. So it's that optical delusion.